Peggy 18.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the COD Esports Weekly Recap Show.
Right over there.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I think of this long line in my head, and I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, do I want to say hello? Half the time I mix it up, but it's going to be an exciting day. You know, we're going to have a little bit of a different feel here for the show to start things off, just because Europe didn't have any matches this week. Obviously, their Stage 1 finals are going to take place next week. Yep. Glad you guys are joining me. We're going to talk a little bit about Australia and New Zealand. Their finals are this weekend, and a lot about North America, because this is coming on the wire, man. We've got one week left.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone's kind of thinking about, right? Obviously, Australia, Mr. X just landed.
Yeah.
So he'll be out there.
Made it there safely. That's always good to hear.
We can all just pray they keep him there.
Yeah, I think that's the best case scenario here. But either way, very much looking forward to talking about the North American relegation teams. That's what my highlight of the show today.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a big day. And the first thing we're going to talk about, though, is going to be Australia and New Zealand, because they, again, have their $150,000 Stage 1 final this weekend. A lot on the line. 4 teams have made it out of the groups, and it's going to be insane to see how this breaks down. Now, the first matchup I want to talk about is going to be Tainted Minds going up against Immunity. Now, when they played each other during the regular season, that was a split. Revan, tell me a little bit about these guys and what you expect.
Well, Immunity, they're a very solid kind of middle-of-the-back team over in Australia. This is a good group of guys. They're mainly from the New Zealand area, and you know, for that reason, sometimes they struggle in some of the online matches. But coming into LAN, I have a lot of faith in this team. I think they're really going to put up a good match against Tainted Minds. But the thing working against Immunity, of course, is Tainted Minds. They just have so much international experience behind them. These are the guys that you saw, a lot of them on the Trident T1 Daughters squad that placed well during Ghost at COD Champ. So a lot of really talented players on Tainted Minds, and I just think their slaying power when compared to Immunities. I think Tainted Minds has the upper hand there.
And I think that plays a big role, right? Because when the COD World League first started for Australia, when we were kind of breaking down the teams, looking at everybody, there were some of these players that literally had never been to a LAN before those qualifiers.
To be fair, the scene just isn't as developed.
Oh, absolutely. But that not only just having LAN experience, but also international LAN experience will only help in those clutch matches where, once again, single elimination, best of 7. You need to make sure your nerves, your jitters, they don't affect you in that match.
No, yeah, I get what he's saying. It hasn't been there as far as prize pools, org support, all the different things that you want to have here for your team to prosper hasn't been there. I mean, a lot of these guys have had to work full-time jobs, or maybe they've been in school, haven't been able to kind of make esports their career, which we've had a lot of players able to do in North America for quite some time. The increased prize pools, you just got to think it's going to keep growing and growing. But we like to take a look at these teams, get an in-depth look behind the scenes at some of these rosters, as some of you guys in North America maybe haven't seen a lot of these teams. One we want to look at first here is going to be Immunity. Let's check it out.
At the time, we were all 4 Kiwis, and we all had really bad internet back then. And so playing online against Aussie teams was a bit of a challenge. Once you play, you can't just stop playing it. Like you feel just the thrill of the competition.
I've always been quite good at like every video game I play. I just want to be better than everyone, not just AU, everyone. I definitely want to go to America, 100%.
My first goal really was just kind of like to prove myself within the community and show everyone that like actually can compete. We were really confident coming to this event, and we played well online. You know, we're all good friends. We all talked about what was going wrong, what was going right.
I've come a long way. I started from the bottom, but I still think there's a little way to go from here. At the moment, that's the goal, is to beat all the teams here.
He's shocked. He's a big rival of mine and a good friend as well. So he's a good way to keep motivated and reach the top of Australia and hopefully the world.
I think it has changed my life. Just the friendships I've made out of game as well. Just probably be friends with these people for years to come, even after I stop playing.
They're really important to me. Being able to do something I enjoy and being able to see the world doing it would be a great accomplishment. With the CWL as well, given the opportunities that that's presenting, I think it's really, really cool, and I love it at the moment.
All right, always great to see a behind-the-scenes look at these guys because, again, here in North America, especially with the time zone difference, we don't get to see them a lot. Maybe, and if you do get to see them play, some of these guys have made a run at champs. You don't necessarily get to see behind-the-scenes footage, able to see what a day in life is like or what makes them passionate about esports. So awesome stuff there from Immunity. Now, on the other side of this, again, it's 4 teams that are going to be competing for $150,000. It's ridiculous. The ones we want to talk about next is going to be Mindfreak going up against Orbit. Now, Mindfreak has kind of been in a world of their own. You see here they split their matches, but that was actually the first matchup of the CWL. One of their players slept through the match, I think it was.
He overslept. He stayed up too late playing video games, and he missed the first match ever of the CWL.
And we were laughing about it. Are you serious, Mindfreak? And then they barely drop a map. They take first place. Yeah. They have 4 of the top 5 KDs. They've been on an absolute roll. I mean, what can Orbit do to potentially play upset to this? Because Mindfreak not only are they incredibly talented, but they have more LAN experience, international LAN experience.
I don't think there's anybody in Australia more experienced.
This is the top team without a doubt in the Australian region. I think if you kind of compare them on a global scale as well, maybe you put them, top 10 in the world. I think this is a very talented squad, but really does it for me is their overall slang. You look at all their stats when it comes out to slang, I think their overall team KD is like a 1.19.
It's absurd.
It's absurd, just the type of numbers they're able to put up.
If someone has over like a 1.2 on average on the week in North America, we're like,
that's big.
Damn, that's a huge week. The fact that they're averaging that is absurd. That there's so much, and it's been those 4 guys for a while. It's not
in Hardpoint, these guys average 245 points per game in Hardpoint, and they limit their opponents to 145 or 150.
Oh God! So they average
they usually win by at least 90 points in every single Hardpoint.
I think the one thing too with Orbit, right, is we saw them have, I believe it was the longest starting
winning
streak. They were 7-0 to kick things off. Obviously, that's with a free win versus Mindfreak for their first match.
Still, that's impressive.
Yeah, they definitely showed that they deserve to be up here. They deserve to be in this spot.
Couldn't agree more.
They got a tough draw with this first matchup against Mindfreak. Is it possible they win? Yes. Do I think they win? I don't know about you. I don't think they take it.
Well, listen, with this single elimination format, you never know if Mindfreak start off going into the event, with some cold fingers, some nerves coming behind them. Who knows? Maybe Orbit can cause an upset.
Anything is possible. Now, we've showed the Mindfreak team video, I think, one time before. We did it earlier in Stage 1. But if you guys didn't see it, I know you guys are hopping in and out watching from week to week on the Thursday show. If you're a North American viewer and you haven't seen much about Mindfreak, I promise you, come COD Champs time, they will be making a run at top 8. I can almost guarantee it. They're incredible players, and they are people that you want to know more about. Let's take a look at their team profile video.
My first LAN event was Modern Warfare 2. I went there with my mum. She rocked up and everybody's looking around like, oh, there's Buzzer. He brought his mum with him. I ended up placing second. I mean, there was an 8-team event, and it's just the experience, you know what I mean?
Ever since 2013, my first LAN, I never expected I'd be going to LA twice, Paris, Gfinity, all around Australia. You think you just win a few competitions online, a few $100, but I've been able to we won 15 grand last year, travel the world. You can't ask for much more really.
My own personal goal is just to become the best, be that household name. I just continue to strive and work towards that and eventually make it on the big stage.
Where at the moment we've got the 3 best teammates and friends that I could basically ask for as players. I mean, we all have the same goals, same personalities, we all want to win, we're all on the same page, same line, whatever you want to call it.
I came 6th at COD Champs, probably the highlight of my career so far, but there's still so much more I can do.
All 4 of us have that same competitive nature. We all want to win and be the best in Australia. So as soon as we get that one, hiccup and hurdle, it really cuts us deep. I mean, we try not to show it too much, but we are hurting inside. Whether it's money on the line, no money on the line, it really does suck.
Once you put in the hours and you actually get to that top level, it's honestly so rewarding.
I'm confident in my own personal skill level. I mean, if anyone isn't and they're playing at an event like this, I don't think you should really be here.
I'm so excited for these guys just to see what they can do. And, you heard it in their voice or when they were talking about the fact that, I never thought I'd be going to London, Paris, Los Angeles, traveling all over for Call of Duty. And it's because, to a degree, we mentioned Australia, New Zealand just wasn't in a place where that was a major thing like it has been here for COD Esports for a long time. So I cannot wait as we get closer and closer to COD Champs just to see what these guys are going to be able to do.
These guys are also very, very excited to have Millennium and Optic coming down for the LAN event coming up in just a few short weeks.
the Crown Invitational.
Yeah, these guys, I saw them all tweet. They are ready for the competition. They welcome it. They want to see some of the biggest and the best from the North American and EU regions.
I mean, to be fair, they've been dominating the Australian scene for so long now that I'm sure they're happy for someone to come down there and give them some
That's
some
true.
fight.
That's true. That should be a fun one for sure. Now, we just made kind of quick predictions on what we expect the final to potentially be. We kind of agreed on Mind Freak versus Tainted Minds. You think that's probably the most realistic? Now, again, single elimination, LAN, anything can happen. But these guys also went 1-1, and there were some tight games. And one went to a Game 5, Game 4 as well. Really back and forth battles between these guys throughout the regular season.
I mean, we've been covering this now since it began, right?
Yeah.
And I think you might agree with me on this. I think this is kind of what everyone predicted, right? Mind Freak versus Tainted Minds.
Tainted Minds got a bit of a slow start to the league, but they came into their own later in the stage.
Yeah, and we saw that. We've seen that in North America with some teams, in Europe as well. You get a slow start. Or we've seen the opposite, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in North America, where teams have started out really, really strong and sort of tailed off at the end, which will be a topic for later. Now, one thing I want to talk about lastly here for Australia, New Zealand is really going to be the relegation teams. The 4 teams that are being relegated out of stage 1, that is, and that's going to be Chiefs, Apotheon, Envy, and XL5. I guess I want to know, who do you guys think gets back in? Maybe how many of those 4 teams?
I think for sure Chiefs and Apotheon make it back in. I had high hopes with Chiefs going into stage 1. This is a team, they beat Mind Freak at the qualifier LAN, but just some shaky games from them in the entire Stage 1 playoffs. They finished 7-7, but I think them and Apotheon will make it through. I don't think XL5 will make it through, though. I think they might get knocked out.
Yeah, the 0-14, you're looking at them kind of pulse also in Europe.
Absolutely.
And, not to a degree here, if there's one team I had to pick that I thought might struggle to get back in for North America, maybe DT. I know it's not really comparable when there's teams that haven't got a series win, but there's been one team that's been the first out, and you wonder, are they going to be able to make it back? Can they get back in through relegation? We're going to have to find out. That's this weekend, so it's a 2-day event, I believe, starting on Saturday. It's going to be insane. Matt flew out there. He's ready to go, joining those casters. Should be a heck of a lot of fun, but I want to transition here now over to North America because we've got a lot to break down for you guys. The first thing I want to go through is going to be week 10, because next week, week 11, final week, these 2 matches are it for these teams trying to get in. Now let's take a look here, Jack. Tuesday, Wednesday's matches. What really stood out for you the most? I mean, you see that first match there, CLG taking the loss when they needed a much-needed win, but that was against FaZe Clan. The first one that really stands out is that LG win over Envy. But with the way Envy's been playing, is that even a shocker right now?
I think that was kind of the thing, right? Everyone looking for Envy to potentially take that match, but they've been as shaky as ever. Luminosity get that win. I think that kind of kicked off what was a crazy week, right? This was just Tuesday. We also had the secondary stream matches, which were pretty important as well, but Wednesday really told the biggest story for me.
They really did. Let's take a look first, though, at the secondary stream here from Tuesday, just so you guys can see those results. You see TSM getting a big win over Complexity. Complexity, kind of that second team other than Envy that's been trailing off a bit here towards the end. Elevate beating H2K. Elevate on the rise. H2K had that 2-0 week a few weeks back, and we're thinking, oh, God, they're back. They're definitely going to make it in, and that's not been the case.
They beat Optic Gaming at UMG South Carolina. They come back 2-0 week. They're all in the team house together.
Final of the 25K.
You think they're about to cruise. Next thing you know, they've really kind of fallen off the path a little bit, looking to see if they can be one of the 5 teams that's still in the battle for these last couple spots.
Well, they certainly have a chance, and we'll be talking about all 5 of those teams here soon. But let's take a look at day 2, Wednesday's results. And like you said, things got out of control here, Jack.
Ridiculous. It all started with the CLG statement over Envy, right? Everyone said, CLG, you need to clutch up. Well, not only do they clutch up, but they go 3-0 map count, which this plays a big factor because it's not a head-to-head that's the first tiebreaker.
True.
It's the overall map count throughout the stage. Then FaZe, they go in, they wind up battling against TSM, but the matches you really covered later on in the day, Dream Team 3-2 over Luminosity, and then Optic Gaming taking down Complexity in Game 5 as well.
Yeah, those were nuts, but I mean, the one that had the most impact was definitely DTLG, because LG wins that, they're basically guaranteed to be in top 8.
They're looking like they're in the clear.
They certainly would be. And then that Elevate, the Rising Stars, we were talking about how good they've been. Could they potentially get in that top 4, top 3 spot? They end up falling to Team Caliber. What a massive win that was for the TK players.
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to speak to Neslo a little bit today, and I know we'll go in depth with them a little bit later on, but Neslo was talking about how this TK team, they deserve some of the talk. We would talk a little bit negative about them.
I've been giving them as much flack as anyone.
Yeah, but he says, it was for good reason. They weren't playing up to their potential. These are 4 veteran players. They have had the slaying power in the past. It just wasn't really working as a single unit. Neslo has really stepped up his game. I believe his KD's gone from like average, just really average at best, to almost like a 1.2 in the last 8 matches.
No, he has been playing great, and that's a big part of why they've been doing well, because he's an emotional player. Yeah. And they kind of feed off that, I think. When he's in a positive mood, when he has that positive energy and playing well, it really, really helps this TK team, and we've seen that. The question is, can they close it out now in the final week?
They had the best night imaginable last night with how the matches all broke down, obviously with TSM losing, with Luminosity losing, with H2K struggling as well. Again, TK, they were blessed by the COD gods. Neslo says, you know what? We recognize we got a great opportunity. We clutched up in our one match. We're making this happen.
It was unreal. Now, let's take a look. In case you haven't seen the standings then through Week 10, these standings are what bring us into the final 2 matches, really. You'll see they're highlighted in red at the bottom. What it really boils down to, though, it's kind of Luminosity through CLG. Dream Team has already been knocked out. They are going to have to play through relegation.
Those top 6 are set. They're in the clear.
And look how close they are in, like, map win percentage, in record. It's insane.
We mentioned CLG. I mean, look at how they are. Yes, they're 11th place, but they have the 2nd highest map win percentage, really in part to their crazy hardpoint gameplay, which some of you touched on yesterday, of how they're pretty darn good at hardpoint.
No, it's always, they've been great at hardpoint. I think Methods has been excellent. Felony at times has been great. It's really just, they get that win. How many times have we seen them up kind of 1-0 or even 2-0 times, and they just can't close out? It's been the game 5. So they 0-6 or something? 0-6 in game 5.
Don't worry, we'll break that down later on.
I mean, great hardpoint team. They just got to get the rest together. But moving forward here, we want to talk about a couple matches from Wednesday night that had some big plays, that had some swings. The first one we're going to talk about is Optic versus Complexity. That was actually the final match last night. And that one ends up going all the way to a game 5. It was about as epic and as exciting as they come. We'll check out some highlights while we talk through this one. But as good as Optic has been, Complexity gave them a little bit of a scare. And it was odd how these maps really ended up breaking down, because I have been, I look for ways to critique every team and see where they're struggling. At times this year, it's been a little bit down to Optic's S&D, but they sure stepped it up in this specific game. It was nuts.
End up going into it, and Optic and Complexity, they battle out of it. There it is there on Breach Hardpoint. Now, Complexity, they've been hard on themselves in how they've played Hardpoint in the past. You saw, I believe it was Parasite or Nameless today, mentioned how they've begun to really step it up to that Hardpoint game, and I think it kind of sets the tone for their series. You see here, against Optic Gaming, they wind up taking this one, which really set the standard for the series. You knew it was going to be like an overall long matchup.
Well, I thought maybe it was going to be an Optic 3-0. As soon as they took that hardpoint, you think this is going game 5. That's your first thought. It just didn't break down at all how you thought it would. It was actually the CTF and the hardpoint, I believe, they were able to take. And when we take a look at the hardpoint, the hardest thing to do against Optic Gaming is to outslay them. All 4 players on Complexity, if I remember correctly, went positive, which is just unheard of kind of when you play Optic.
I will mention that Breach Hardpoint is very easily Optic Gaming's worst hardpoint map. It's one that Luminosity has beat them in the 25K before. Something about that map and how OG plays it doesn't really wind up working out. You think that was one that they narrowly beat Envy on as well, 250 to like 247.
Yeah.
The uplink gets sloppy here. Complexity, the worst uplink record in all the COD World League in North America.
You saw Parasite tweet about it a little bit last night. He's like, we've gotten good in some areas, but we have a lot of work to do.
Definitely.
Really, when you're speaking about that specific game mode, it was a train. It was tough to watch. You see Karma clutching up here in S&D. This was a real back and forth battle coming down to the wire. So many big plays in this one, and you'll see Karma closing it out here.
Karma's the best Heatwave player. Karma's the best Heatwave player in Black Ops.
I love it.
I'm just going to say that.
And you don't have to maybe use it there. Maybe you can win the gunfight. Just securing that round, huge.
As he goes in for that engagement, if he doesn't use Heatwave, his opponent uses it, Karma loses that battle. There, he gets it done. The win is all that matters, and I think this was a kind of another example of a big statement from Optic. They take both Search and Destroys off Complexity, who are one of the best S&D teams in all of Black Ops 3, right up there with Elevate. I believe it's like Elevate, Optic, and Cole are like the top 3 records, I think.
Elevate's 18-8 or something like that, I think I saw. And Optic has certainly been stepping it up. You saw Scump coming up in the clutch. I think Krim, Mr. Game 5, ends on a 4-streak or 5-streak. He had 11 kills in this one. So Krim going massive. That's what we talked about before this. For some reason, whenever I cast Optic Gaming or watch Optic Gaming in a Game 5, Krim has a monster performance. He just does it time and time again. The guy is not fazed by big moments whatsoever.
I don't know what to say. I mean, we've talked about Optic. They're in a great spot, 18-2. But I'm kind of all over the place with this Complexity team, right? as a squad, you never know what you're going to get. It must be so tough being a Colt fan because 25K, they go Game 5 with Riot Gaming to start off Championship Sunday. It's like nothing against Riot Gaming, but you expect Complexity to win that match pretty much with ease.
Yeah.
Then their next series, they face Rise and go Game 5 with them again. A series that you think Rise might have a good chance of taking. Then they go Game 5 versus Optic. You know, are Complexity a top 8 team? Are they a top 4 team? Where do they stand?
I know.
If they get a little bit more consistent, I think that this squad will definitely find themselves in the top echelon of squads.
It's tough. It's tough to play some. You think about it all the time. We've had so many conversations about where do you put them and Envy right now. Like where do they fall? These two, considered top 2 to 4 teams for a while there, have just been sinking ships as of late. Can they bring it together before the LAN is the big thing? Now, I want to talk a little bit about Scump from this matchup. I want to highlight him from the side of Optic Gaming. He was an absolute monster, coming up big in S&D and in all respawns. I've just been looking. There's no weak game mode for him or map.
Scump got vocal on Twitter yesterday. He called us out. He said the casters they always kind of talk trash about Optic Gaming's S&D game, and what's tough is you got to pinpoint things that are weaker on a team, right?
It's hard when they're all
the
good.
best hardpoint team by record, the best, I believe, uplink team by record. They're right there in CTF. I mean, when you win like 80% of your maps, what is there to pinpoint? S&D, it's one of their weaker kind of spots where teams can beat them, but then they beat the team Complexity twice in a row.
What's scary, though, coming into the Stage 1 finals is I think they've improved a lot and they've been playing amazing.
Definitely.
So they don't really seem to have a weak point right now is what's going to be scary as we get into it. Now, the guy that I want to talk about a bit from Complexity is going to be Parasite. I thought he had a really good series. I think he ended up with something like a 1.25 KD. He was putting up big numbers. He was kind of actually put away that assault rifle a bit, been rocking the sub more. Him and Nameless have switched roles, and he's been just big in I feel like every game mode I've been watching him in, even though they struggled a lot in the uplink, he was holding his own. He was picking up the slang. He was doing what he could, just not enough against Optic.
I think he definitely realizes that on this team right now, they all make their share of mistakes. We've seen Parasite. He roasted himself on Twitter the other day because of that 25K where they lost like 8-0 in CTF that Revan and I casted.
Yeah.
He missed a flag that was right next to him. Instead of returning it, he tried to challenge a gunfight, and he went, wow, I don't know how I didn't see that. I lost that. That was a start of a loss there for my team. You want to see a kind of a humble type of mindset from Parasite because this Complexity team's 10-10. They haven't had a spectacular stage.
No.
Yes, they were doing well. They've completely fallen off.
It's like 1-4 in their last 5, I think is what it is now.
They have an opportunity to perform well at Stage 1 finals, but they need to grind up until that point and fix their mistakes, especially the uplink game mode.
They really do. Now, I want to go into one of my favorite segments. We've got former professional player Revan going to be doing another theater rewind, breaking down a couple of great plays we saw from that Complexity versus Optic matchup.
All right, thank you very much, boys. Like Maven was saying, plays from Complexity versus Optic Gaming, a crazy match results in some crazy plays. And now today's focus of the Theater Rewind, I'm going to pinpoint it on execution. How do these guys execute their plays when they're in the moment? I'm going to start on this uplink game between Optic and Complexity, of course. And the player I want to highlight the most out of this one is going to be Scumpy. So right here, what you see him doing is just preemptively pushing out the lanes. And I'm just going to go ahead and pause it right around here because every time you're in an uplink game, whenever you're trying to move the drone forward and put yourself in a position to score, your first order of business is to push out the lane ahead of the drone carrier. Right now, the drone carrier is Karma. And of course, Formal did just die right in front of him. But for argument's sake, we could say that there were 2 players ahead of the drone carrier pushing out the lane and trying to establish some position in front of Karma. So moving back over to Scump, he then winds up cleaning up Ricky, and this is where he just starts going on a huge tear, and for good reason. He's got so much position to work with here. As you see, they put in the dunk, and then Scump just continues, putting pressure onto the Complexity spawns. He's maintaining this forward position. Now I want to go ahead and pause it here for just a quick second, because this was a big reason why Optic Gaming had so much success against Complexity on this specific map. Just look at all the pressure they're putting onto the Complexity goal. You got Scump, he's set up near the back trains. Crimsix took Scumpy's previous position behind this blue truck. This is going to be the easiest dunk of Formal's life because Nameless and Miracles, as they're rotating back to try to clear out their side of the base, there's no way they're going to be able to take Scump and Crimsix. They're fighting from unfavorable positions. As now I want to move over to Formal. So just like that, he gets the dunk, and then after he takes down Miracles, and that's 3 down once again from Complexity. You can already see how the play is developing here.
Optic Gaming have their ideal setup. You got Karma in the middle of the map. He's watching the overextension. He could easily get this pass off to players with forward position. You got Scump here. He's about to use his HCXD. You got Krim. He can kind of float between helping Scump and trying to pick off the Complexity players off respawn because they're going to be spawning over near side 10. If they push forward towards that cardboard wall towards Crimsix's right, he's there to pick up the kills. So back over to Formal. Just like that, he's going to get the pass. Now, I'm going to pause it here for just a quick second just because I want to highlight the spawns from Complexity. Ricky's the furthest one pushed back, but everybody else, because you're spawning in this tin area, the doorway right here to their right, it's such a narrow position to try to fight through. You saw it especially in the CLG game. You got a player position up here on Grandma's roof, and it can make it near impossible to rotate back. And when you're unable to rotate back, you're kind of forced to overextend, and from there you just give up so many points just like that. As in a span of 40 seconds, Optic Gaming surge out to a 6-0 lead versus Complexity as they go on to easily win this uplink map. Now, that wasn't the only play I wanted to highlight throughout this series. There's another one as we switch screens towards the CTF. Now, just to set the setting a little bit for this one, very uneventful start to this game, but we're in some of the final seconds now. It's a stalemate situation. You see the flag in the hands of Parasite as well as Karma. And the player I want to highlight here is going to be Miracles. Why? Because if you check the bottom right-hand side of your screen, he's got his kinetic armor. So as he starts to push forward, Nameless picks up a kill. And this is going to be very important because as I flip through these Complexity players, of course, Parasite's in the back of his base with the Optic flag in his hand. You have Nameless here as well as Ricky pushed up pretty close behind him. Since they're pushing out this right side wing, they're drawing the attention from Optic Gaming towards this part of the map, right? So you see Miracles preemptively pops his kinetic armor. And I want to go free cam for this one because you can see how things just fall apart for Optic Gaming in this moment. Just look at all of their positioning right now. They're way back on the helipad. Karma's just trying to get out of harm's way. Scump and Formal, they're so focused on Nameless, who's flanking through this side room. And as I hit play, Miracles with kinetic armor, he's able to find two. Scump runs out of ammo. Ricky's there to clean up the kill. They get the return and the capture after that. Now, it's a little kind of hectic what happened on the defensive side. So let's switch back over to Scumpy and see what happens in his point of view. So he also has kinetic armor. And you can see that they're really focused on Nameless coming through this side red room. So you see Scumpy starts to take some fire. He's getting some help from his teammates. And now he puts his focus onto Nameless, but he uses half his clip. The kinetic armor soaks up the rest of the bullets as Scump falls. Ricky immediately pulls the flag, and keep in mind, there's like 16 seconds remaining at this point. And what's happening from Optic Gaming right now off the respawn? Crimsix pushing from glass, he's gonna try to hit the lower wall run. Karma spawning up over near back glass. You got Parasite off of the flag cap. He's just gonna be holding this angle if anybody from Optic Gaming pushes to the side of the map. They have all the cutoffs working in their favor. And in the span of around 30 seconds, Complexity are able to capture 2 flags. They make a huge return happen, and going into the half, they take a 2-0 lead. Just some absolutely crazy stuff happening in this entire series, but that is going to wrap it up for this week's Theater Rewind. I hope you guys enjoyed the action. I'm going to send it back over to Maven and Courage to finish out the show.
Yeah, that was unreal. I was casting with Revan, and it was something like a 3.5-minute stalemate. Like they got both flags out around a minute and a half, and it slows down. No one's able to do really anything, and then the floodgates open. And Complexity scores 2 flags in 30 seconds. That was unbelievably clutch and brought it to the Game 5, ultimately.
This is the same Complexity team that I casted a 20-minute-long evac CTF where we had to wind up replaying because no one scored in 10 minutes of overtime. Apparently, this Cole team loves stalemates on this match.
I guess. I mean, yeah. But that's one thing, we were playing against a team like Optic. You think sometimes, the longer the stalemate lasts, that they can just sneak in that one score, maybe you have a better opportunity. But they end up taking, I think, 3-1. Excellent stuff there we saw from Complexity. Now, the next matchup we want to talk about a little bit is going to be LG versus DT. Now, the reason this map ended up being so important was match. If LG gets a victory here, they basically solidify themselves into the top 8.
Yeah.
And you're playing against the last ranked team currently in North American Stage 1. With the way Luminosity has been playing, we all thought, oh, this is done.
I 100% thought that Luminosity were going to 3-0, and they go up 2-0 in this series. They're looking great. Now, also about the relegation picture, I had heard from someone that if Luminosity win this match, CLG's hopes were eliminated.
Yeah,
now,
that makes sense.
CLG obviously lucked out with how Luminosity wind up losing this one all the way into Game 5, but I don't know. I mean, you were casting this one. What for you like changed between games 1 and 2 and then into 3 and 4?
It was odd because they get the 2-0 lead, right? And going into the uplink before that, there were some issues with Killa. He disconnected, I think, like twice. We had to restart the game like 3 times. And part of me thought, like, oh, God, this DT team has given up. They're not going to try and take this series. They just, they found out the night before they were done.
Yeah.
And he gets back in the game. All of a sudden, they take a great uplink. Chino, they love uplink. This DT team loves it. They take that, and then I couldn't tell you how all of a sudden we get to a game 5 in which DT has never, they've got one game 5 win through the entire, it's like 1-6, 1-7, something absurd like that, right?
Yeah, it was I think it was 1-6.
1-6, and then they come up clutch. It was unbelievable. I just don't know how DT, you think, it's tough for teams to play spoiler, right?
Yep.
When that's your role, when you know you can't get into the finals, you think it's going to be so difficult to get a win. It blew my mind that they were able to pull off this series.
Especially against a Luminosity team that was, 3-0 in the last 2 weeks, knew how important this win would be to the team. It all really just crumbles apart in front of them, and that worries me because later on in the show, we're also going to talk about, who Luminosity is to face next week with 5 teams still in the running for, the final 2 spots. If Luminosity win this match, you think they're in the clear. Instead, Now they have to worry just as much as the other teams.
Oh, they certainly do. And we'll talk a little bit about DT after this as well, once we get through the highlights. Well, let's talk about it a little bit now. They end up taking this game, but obviously they're going to be relegated. They're going to have to play, try to get back into stage 2. You had a big performance. At least talking about Slang, Chino and Sender went really big for the team.
Yep.
What do you think about them? Their chances to qualify? How are you looking at this Dream Team squad?
I think my eyes are still on Killa, and it sounds cliche, but we looked at the stats so far. Killa has the worst KD along the pro players in the COD World League. He's played, I believe, like almost 100 rounds or 100-plus rounds of Search and Destroy. He's got like a .68 KD, something that you don't want to see from the quote-unquote best S&D player in the world back in Ghosts. Also, you just need more consistency. Yes, they've shown their proficiency in uplink. They've held their own in hard points. But you can't rely on having to try to clutch up in Game 5s when it just doesn't work out majority of the time for your team.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. And the guy I want to talk about a little bit here is just going to be Sender, because I was impressed with what Sender was able to do. He had a big performance. He stepped it up for the squad. And what do you think about him? What can he do for this team? How is he going to help bring them back into stage 2?
What I like about Sender a lot is he's someone who's positive vibes quite often. You're always seeing good things from him, whether it's in communication or what's going on with his team. I just worry sometimes as an anchor, you need to be very vocal, right? What you have pushing you, what lanes you need help with, what's being watched. I kind of wonder if sometimes his overall communication is a little bit lesser than the likes of Formal on Optic Gaming or someone in a similar role. Want to see him play a little bit more of a leadership role on this team, get a little bit more vocal for a squad that sometimes you need to keep in check with the likes of smoke grenades being thrown all over the map by Killa.
No, I could not agree more. And I'm curious just to see who can get back in. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about relegation. We're going to talk about the challenge teams as well. But can DT do it? We'll have to wait and see. They've been the first team knocked out of the Stage 1 playoffs. Now, before we talk a little bit more about the relegation squads, the bubble squads, let's take a look at the standings one more time for you guys. In case you maybe tuned into the show late, you're not sure where everyone kind of stands here throughout the top 12 ranking here in North America. It's Luminosity through CLG that we're going to discuss, because you can see it's just 2 wins separating all 5 of those teams. Everything has just been so incredibly close. But actually, before we get into the relegation, one thing I want to do, it's been a new segment, we've had here. We've had Theater Rewind, and we brought in Looney. He was actually breaking down a map for us.
Yep.
Earlier, what did we do? Stronghold Hardpoint he did. The next one we want to take a look at is actually going to be French Hardpoint. We're going to have Revan taking control here as we're going to go through, starting at the first Hardpoint, kind of breaking down different cuts you want to watch, different ways to break in. Let's toss it now over to Revan's screen as we'll take a look at the kind of the overview. I want to check out the map here, Revan, with you as we talk through these.
All right, sure thing, Maven. Thanks for throwing it over to me. But yeah, it's going to be French Hardpoint, as he said, where I'm going to be walking you through kind of how to approach this map, how to set up in these specific hardpoints. As Maven was saying, we're going to be taking a look at hardpoint number 1 to start things off here. And it's right smack dab in the middle of the map. Can be kind of chaotic at times for sure, but I mean, there's certainly some positions you want to look out for, and certainly some ways you could approach this hardpoint to find some success. So let's go ahead and switch it over to the game screen, and I'll walk you guys through it.
All right. Well, what do you want to see from this, Jack? We're going to start at the first hard point. We're going to kind of direct Revan here. What's the most important part of this first hard point?
Revan, for me, talk to me about the back corner white truck outside the cardboard wall of how teams normally play it. You normally see nades fly over because the truck explodes.
Yeah.
Do you like seeing the anchor wait it out? Do you want to see him get there as soon as possible? What's your ideal setup for this?
I mean, you don't necessarily have to wait it out. You're pretty safe from the explosion, even if you just back up over here and just play a different angle, or just run flak jacket off the start. You get some trophies out in front. You could block those grenades off. So I don't think you have to wait at all. And I think this is a very key position to go to off the break, just because you could zone out this player that's going to be peeking through the top barn window. You could also inch out a little bit forward and see if anybody's going to be attacking from the small fence. So this is going to be a very key position to hold if you want to cover your player inside the hard point.
Oh, absolutely. And now on this one as well, what are some of the interesting spots you see players try to kind of hide in the hard point at? You see the two white trucks, but also that corner outside L wall. Walk me through how you want to see your subs play this one. Do you want to just let them have the ARs do the work and wait for a call out, or do you want to see them play a little bit more aggressive and have maybe an AR in the hill?
So a lot of times players use these positions because it gives them cover. So for this one, for example, you can't get shot from top grandmas, you can't get shot from that white truck, and those are going to be the key positions where you see the AR players set up. So that's a big reason as well. And a lot of times when you're first entering into the hard point, you're going to be taking some fire. So you see players just kind of slide forward and try to regain health, and they really rely on the ARs to look over them. A lot of times you see players also push up right here along the bricks window. He could zone out this entire side of the map as long as he's relying on his AR players. And you got to be pretty careful, because if you're playing it from somewhere like here, you got to watch out where they could see the side of your body from.
All right, well, let's take a look at the map again as we're going to start to rotate over here to the second hard point. You'll see number 2. It's going to be over there in yard. And the first thing I want to talk with you a little bit about Revan, what's kind of your preferred side? When you're holding that first hard point, how do you want to rotate over to hard point number 2?
All right, so first thing you want to do is play for spawns. Personally, I like spawning over here at the beginning of the hard point, just because it gives you 2 clear angles of attack. You can move in through back alley, or you could attack through bricks, whereas if you're forced to spawn over near auto, sure, you have these 2 spots, but when you're inside the hard point, like you got an AR player set up here in the back alley, he could really zone out this entire side of the map. It could be pretty tough to take a player off this position.
Absolutely. Now, one thing as well, as you mentioned, at the start you want to spawn on that side. When do you think is the correct time for teams to really try to push middle street and get control of that granny spawn for the next hard point?
So I think if you have control of the hard point and you're initially spawning over near your back barn, around the 30-second mark is good to start pushing through 10. But if you're unable to push through 10, around the 15, 10-second mark, I think you really should give it up and decide to attack through mid-street or through back tracks, because the upcoming hardpoint is one of the most important ones on this map.
Yeah, we can go back out to the map and take a look at that one. Hardpoint number 3, it's the Granny's Hill. It is the money hardpoint for a lot of teams. We mentioned how the battles happen down Middle Street, but the area I want to first begin to kind of highlight is this back spawn area by the silos, also Globe. How many ARs do you kind of want to see set up for this hardpoint, Revan, and locking down the spawns for your team?
I think for the most part, 2 should be fine. Sometimes you'll see 3, depending on the team. Like a team like Envious might decide to run 3. A more aggressive team like Elevate might decide to only run, 2 ARs. But it could vary team from team. But like you're saying, this is a common spot for players to hold. They could see the cross mid-street. They could also contest for anybody rotating over towards back tracks. But for that one reason, like the anchor spot, as you're saying, it's so tough to take someone out of a position back here because you just don't know where they're going to be playing from. A lot of times you'll see the anchor players, maybe spot here if they're using an AR. They could be playing way back silos. A lot of different off angles you could use. If you have an SMG, you could even be pushed up right over towards here if somebody doesn't check their corners. Or, if somebody's inside the hardpoint as well, they could take cover behind the bathtub and put pressure there. So that's exactly why I was saying, when you can't push through here early on, it's not worth it later in the game.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And this is going to be the one where you can really lock down a ton of time. It's kind of between here. The deciding hard points a lot of times in these close games end up being kind of between this and getting to tracks. And that can be a really important rotation as well. Let's take a look at the minimap one more time as we're going to get headed towards the 4th hard point, which is going to be over on those tracks. What's your preferred route here? Is there a side you like to hold down a little bit more, or is there one that's maybe a bit easier for a team?
I don't think the spawns initially have too much to affect here. I think you could realistically hold both sides because often at the start of this hardpoint, it's just really contest, right? You put a submachine gun player either on this side of the tracks or over here, and you just let the ARs battle out on that long distance range. But your goal on this hardpoint is to push out the other side. That's why you see teams so often just flood players through the other side because, You know, if you could just push towards the other side of the train tracks, you could force your opponents to spawn all the way back there in your barn. Or, depending on where you initially spawn from, they could start spawning near, like, auto over there. And for that reason, it takes a good 10 to 15 seconds to set up a push to re-break. But if that's your initial goal, you could realistically get, like, 40, 45 seconds on this hard point if you're able to push it out early enough.
All right, great stuff, Revan. Thank you for breaking this down as always. We've been trying to go through some of the hardpoint maps. We've been now through what? We went through Stronghold?
We went through Stronghold, we went through Evac, and then we went through Fringe as well.
Yeah, just like to break these down a bit, get you guys different looks at some of the key areas to hold, because I think it's one of the more confusing kind of game modes for maybe new viewers to follow.
I think that's what it is. It's hectic, obviously anchoring, very important in the game mode, and with no respawn delay. A ton of action going on, a lot of split-second decisions. It's great to break it down for the new viewers.
Well, we looked at the standings right before that, and I want to check it out one more time just for you guys. If you're tuning in now, I want to take a look at the standings, because this is what we're going to touch on again. We're going to be looking through Luminosity through CLG. These guys so tight in the standing. It's unbelievable how really these. What do you think? Is it going to be kind of Tuesday's matches that really decide things, or do you think it's going to come down to Wednesday?
I think it really could come down to the wire with some of these teams. We see the likes of Luminosity, which we'll talk about each team's schedule in this one, but Luminosity face 2 bubble teams next week. CLG and TSM, they face off early on. I think CLG, if they lose that match, I think they're absolutely done, obviously, if they lose that. But it's going to be close.
Well, Revan, thank you for coming back and joining us after that great gameplay. We want to break down some of these teams, who they're going to be playing. The first one we're going to start with, let's talk about the roster for CLG. They've made some moves recently, 2 over the past couple of months. Accuracy joining the squad. They got the big 3-0 victory they needed this week, which when talking about map win percentage is huge. But as soon as we can, we'll be bringing up some lower thirds here to kind of show you guys who they're going to play, statistically how it looks. So you'll see they're playing TSM and Dream Team. You think they might be able to get those 2 wins? Did they finish 2-0 in a strong fashion?
CLG scares me because there's times where you go, okay, this team's going to lose, like their match we saw yesterday.
Yeah.
You think Envy's going to just destroy them, and then CLG wins 3-0. Up against a team like Dream Team, which is still playing with all their heart. They beat Luminosity last night. The note I had, because I wrote down some notes on all these relegation teams, right? CLG, we always kind of harp on DT for their Game 5. CLG 0-6.
They're even worse than DT.
0-6 in Game 5s. Listen to some of these they're facing. H2K, they clutched that one up. That helps them definitely in the standings. Twice versus Rise in Game 5 they lost. 1 versus Optic, Elevate, and Cole. All in Game 5.
Those are tough matches.
Those are tough matches.
The Game 5 against Optic, they were up 5-1, and they wind up getting swept out of that one.
Think of those like small differences, right? If you clutch up in some of those Game 5s, once again, even split them, CLG goes from the toughest road to getting out of relegation to being above Luminosity in the overall standings.
That's the case with a lot of teams, especially Complexity, DT. You know, if Complexity lose their Game 5s, all of a sudden, you know, they're in the relegation zone.
They are incredibly important. It's just it's crazy seeing the difference kind of between the teams when it comes to Game 5 and how important. Well, I mean, the top teams, it's been like all 3-0s. There's Optic and 10 different 3-0s.
Oh,
NBA at one point had 6, but a lot of those teams that have been struggling, it's come in the Game 5s. Now, let's move forward. I want to talk about Team Caliber. Let's look at this roster. I know you said you talked to Neslo.
Yeah.
They've been improving. They're feeling good. Do they have what it takes to make it into the top 8?
This is the story of Team Caliber, Revan, and I feel like ever since back when you played, they were the same type of team where it was just like,